Section 21 of Crime, Its Causes and Remedies by Cesare Lombroso. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information on a volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Leon Harvey. Chapter 3. The Prevention of Alcoholism. Subchapter 142. In combating alcoholism, we should be inspired by the extraordinary efforts that the Anglo-Saxons have made. Their temperance societies have become very powerful, and by 1867 already included 3 million members and published 3 weekly and 3 monthly papers. In Glasgow they spent 2,000 to open coffee houses in districts where workmen most frequented the whisky shops. In London on holidays, they opened tea rooms and theatres able to hold more than 4,500 persons. And the Congress in Baltimore in 1873, they were represented by more than 750,000 members, and in 5 years they boasted that they had caused the closing of 4,000 distilleries and 8,000 liquor saloons. In America, the women were powerful allies of these inexorable enemies of alcoholism. To save their brothers and husbands, they forced liquor dealers, by their prayers and their importunate exhortations, to close their shops. Some resisted and threatened to strike them, or turn the hose on them. Others had recourse to the courts, or set bears at them. But they were protected by their own weakness, by their perseverance, and by the righteousness of their cause, and even when a jury found them guilty, the judge was not willing to pronounce sentence. Put to flight one day, they returned to the attack the next, so that many had to yield to their indomitable energy. In Germany and Switzerland there arose, under the auspices of Forel, newspapers and libraries whose sole aim was to combat the abuse of alcohol. Through the combined effect of such efforts, great changes were made in institutions in this regard. In 1832 the custom was commenced of giving additional pay to every sailor who would give up his ration of grog. In the rations of the land troops, spirits were suppressed. The sutlers were forbidden to sell them, and replaced by coffee and sugar, a measure which was later adopted by the great industrial companies. In 1845 the state of New York declared against the unrestricted sale of liquor. Maine followed its example, but nevertheless the sale continued in secret. Then it was that the famous Maine law was passed, which prohibited expressly the manufacture and sale of spirituous liquors except for medicinal purposes. The difficulty of transporting such liquors became extreme. It was forbidden to have more than 1 gallon in the house, and the law permitted domiciliary visits for the purpose of discovering hidden supplies. This law was adopted in some of the other states, but was largely ineffective because of the presence of foreigners and the attitude of the central government. In all the states of the Union, and later in Switzerland and Prussia, laws were passed which prohibited the sale of alcoholic drinks to students, minors, insane persons, and Indians. The dealer was made responsible for damage and injuries caused by drunkenness, responsibility for which in Illinois might go as high as $5,000. In some states the dealer was also liable for damage to the drinker's family caused by idleness and by disease due to drink. In England since 1856 the sale of liquor on holidays has been prohibited. Later in 1864 and 1870 the sale was restricted to certain hours. A fine of from 7 to 40 shillings, or a day in prison, was imposed by law upon every one found publicly in a state of intoxication. In 1871, under Gladstone, who suffered from the unpopularity of the measure, the number of public houses was limited as follows. In the towns, 1 to 1,500 inhabitants, 2 to 3,000 inhabitants, 3 to 4,000 inhabitants. In the country, 1 to 900 inhabitants, 2 to 1,200 inhabitants, 3 to 1,800 inhabitants. Special inspectors are appointed to control the illegal sale of liquor, and adulteration is punished by progressive fines and loss of license. By the law of 1873, it was ordered that no new licenses should be granted as long as existing licenses continued in force, and out of the money received from licenses, certain sums were set aside to buy up the licenses of public houses that it was desired to close. To these things must be added the exhortations of preachers, especially those of Father Matthew, who in 1838-40 succeeded by his eloquence alone in diminishing the consumption of alcohol in Ireland by half and cutting down the crimes from 6,400 to 4,100. Finally, there is a tax upon alcoholic drinks. In the United States, this tax is very high. In France, it pays the state more than 500 million francs, and there is talk of increasing it. In Belgium, it brings in more than 13 million. According to the Penal Code of Holland, passed in 1881, drunkenness upon the public streets is punished by a maximum fine of 15 florins. Upon a second offence, the punishment is imprisonment for 3 days, and upon a third offence, within a year of the first, the imprisonment may be extended to 2 weeks. In succeeding years, it may reach 3 weeks or more, and if the offender is capable of working, he may be sent to a public workhouse for a year or more. The retailer who furnished drinks to a child below 16 years of age is punished by imprisonment for not more than 3 weeks, and by a fine of not more than 100 florins. The law of 1881 forbids the sale of alcohol in quantities of less than 2 litres without the authorization of the government of the commune. This is refused when the number of shops reaches 1 to 500 inhabitants in large cities, 1 to 300 inhabitants in cities from 20,000 to 50,000 population, 1 to 250 inhabitants in the villages. As a result of the promulgation of this law, the number of shops, which was 40,000 in 1881, fell to 25,000 in 1891. In Switzerland, the privilege of exporting alcohol, of making and selling it wholesale, belongs to the government. 2/3 of the quantity consumed must be imported. Of the remaining third, half is manufactured by the state, which has taken over the larger distilleries for this purpose, and the rest is sold by the 200 small distilleries. The price of sale is fixed by the Federal Council. Pure alcohol and the stronger spirits are subject to a federal tax of 80 francs to the metric quintal, as measured by special federal officers. After the passage of this law, the consumption of alcohol drinks fell 20%. The canton of St. Gall, by a law promulgated in May 1891, gave the public authorities, communal or municipal, the power of assuming the guardianship of an habitual drinker at the expense either of the patient or the poor fund. In Sweden, where alcoholism rages to the extent of being an endemic disease, the taxes on the distillation of brandy were raised in 1855, 56, 64 successively from 2 francs to the hectolitre to 20 and 32. The use of steam in the distilleries was forbidden, the production limited to 2,610 litres a day, and distillation permitted only 2 months in the year, that is 7 months, but only in the large distilleries. In order to suppress the small ones, recognized as most harmful to the people, as a consequence, the production of alcohol fell 2/3 in 10 years, and the price rose from 0.50 to 1.30 kronor a litre. In Sweden, a corporation collected enough money to buy up the drink shops of the district and allow the retailers, now become their employees, to make a profit merely upon the tea, coffee and food that they sold. This association has found limitations in 147 Swedish cities. It sold only pure liquors and refused to sell to drunkards or minors. Since 1813, there has existed, moreover, a law which fined a person found drunk upon the streets $3 for the first offence, twice that for the second offence, and for the third and fourth took away his right to vote and representation. At the fifth offence he was condemned to prison or to the House of Correction at hard labour for 6 months, and upon the sixth offence for 1 year. Further, at least in Norway, the sale of spirits is prohibited upon holidays and the day before, and before 8 o'clock in the morning. Which of these remedies has given the best result? Many of the most energetic measures, especially the representative measures, have come far from realizing the end for which they were designed, except in Switzerland, England, and Sweden. We know that from 1851 to 1857, serious crimes decreased 40% in Sweden, and lesser crimes 30%, and that this diminution constantly makes itself felt. There were 40,621 crimes in 1865, and only 25,277 in 1868. In the period from 1830 to 1834, with an average consumption of 46 litres of brandy, there were 59 murders and 2,281 deaths. And in 1875 to 78, the consumption of brandy having fallen to 11 litres, the number of murders had fallen to 18, and that of thefts to 1871 Jacket. At the same time, the average stature and length of life had increased, Bayer, and the figure for suicides of alcoholics, which was 46 in 1861, had fallen to 11 by 1869. The number of drunkards has also decreased, but not so much as in an irregular manner. At Gothenburg, for example, there was, in 1851, 1 drunkard to 19 inhabitants. In 1855, 1 drunkard to 9 inhabitants. In 1860, 1 drunkard to 12 inhabitants. In 1865, 1 drunkard to 22 inhabitants. In 1866, 1 drunkard to 33 inhabitants. In 1870, 1 drunkard to 38 inhabitants. In 1872, 1 drunkard to 35 inhabitants. In 1873, 1 drunkard to 31 inhabitants. In 1874, 1 drunkard to 28 inhabitants. It is nevertheless true that when my colleague Dr. Brusa arrived at Gothenburg on a holiday, though he himself could not get a drop of wine, he met a number of persons drunk on the streets. On the other hand, it is certain that all these draconian laws have not prevented alcoholism from increasing in France and America. It has even been affirmed that the main law is rather a political weapon than a hygienic measure, and that the illicit sale of alcoholic drinks, of which the very legislators who prohibit it are often guilty, furthers alcoholism by making all drinking disreputable. In France, the tax upon alcohol, which rose from 37.4 francs to 60 in 1855, to 90 in 1860, and to 150 in 1871, now actually amounts to 156.25 francs to the hectolitre of pure alcohol. Notwithstanding this, the average per capita consumption rose from 11.45 litres in 1850 to the enormous amount of 41.56 in 1892. Claude. The same thing in effect may be said with regard to England, where notwithstanding the exorbitant tax of 489.20 francs to the hectolitre of pure alcohol, the consumption in the United Kingdom between 1860 and 1880 has weighed between 4.1 and 5.7 litres per capita, and from 1880 to 1893, with some slight changes, has maintained the figure of 4.5 litres. The trifling diminution is certainly less to be attributed to the tax than to the total abstainers, whose number is estimated at 5 million. There is a small reason for astonishment at the comparative inefficacy of these fiscal measures, if we take into account the fact that they only solely and indirectly affect the consumer. This may easily be seen by following Dupuy's calculations. Suppose that a litre of alcohol costs, tax and all, about 4 francs. We know that from a litre of alcohol it is possible to make 2.5 litres of brandy. Now a litre holds 30 to 40 small glasses. Let us say 33, at 3 centilitres to a glass. From a litre of alcohol we should then get 2.5 litres of brandy, or 82 small glasses. At 10 centimetres a glass, the retailer gets 8.20 francs. This is 4.20 francs more than the cost price. The margin is large and leaves ample profit for retailer and wholesaler both. Claude. But the lack of success is due especially to the fact that no repressive law can accomplish its purpose when it runs counter to our instincts. Now among these instincts is the desire for psychic stimulation, such as one may get from wine, a need which increases with the progress of civilization. For this reason the poor miners in Scotland, who have not enough money to buy whisky, have recourse to laudanum, and the poor of London allay the pangs of hunger in the same way. In Ireland, when the preaching of Father Matthew has turned the people away from alcoholic drinks, they unexpectedly became addicted to the use of ether, of which the good pastor had never thought. This, said they, is not wine, it is not gin, which Father Matthew has forbidden us to use, and it makes us merry for a few pence, so we drink it. They made use of it even to the point of drunkenness, frequently taking 7 or 14 grams, while inveterate users went as high as 90 grams. The true ideal of a wise and philanthropic legislator in the combat with alcoholism would be to provide the people with some form of mental stimulation that would injure neither mind nor body, and would not have the danger of alcohol. Subsidies to the large theatres have been discussed in this connection. Why should not popular theatres and shows be subsidized? It would be quite fair to refuse to subsidize great theatres, since they are only for the rich, and to provide instead a means of mental distraction to the poor, which would be of use in preventing alcoholism. At a mass meeting in Turin in the interest of temperance, a workman asked that the theatres should be kept in operation all day on Sunday at a low price, so that the workmen might have something to keep them out of the wine shops. This was the only rational suggestion made at their meeting, and it was indignantly rejected. Forni tells us that in a small district in the south of Italy, the wine shop keeper had the leader of a troupe of comedians thrashed, because, since he had arrived there with his cheap performances, the admission price was 15 centimetres. The retailer had sold only half as much wine as usual. In Italy, as we shall see later, the clergy alone have organised recreations on a large scale for the feast days, by means of which the poor can agreeably pass their time between one prayer and the next without resorting to the wine shop. No other class has done as much. It is necessary also to extend the use of tea and coffee, which stimulate the brain without paralysing the inhibitory faculties, as alcohol does. To do this is not enough to increase the taxes upon alcohol. It is necessary also, as Fioretti and Magnan have suggested, to lower the taxes upon imports, especially upon tea, coffee, and particularly upon sugar, when since it serves to make other drinks agreeable prevents the need of alcoholic beverages, since the dark and unsanitary dwellings, hidden in narrow and dirty streets, in which workmen are obliged to live, drive them irresistibly to the wine shop. We should widen the streets, and build for the working man buildings with better air, and of a sort to make the domestic hearth an agreeable and respectable resting place, to be preferred to the wine shop. After these measures have all been adopted, it will be time to come down upon the retailers of alcoholic beverages, by restricting the hours of sale at night and on holidays, by restricting the licenses, and by forcing the sale of food and coffee, particularly in the neighbourhood of factories. It will be necessary to be even more strict with the proprietors of factories and mines, when they themselves sell alcoholic drinks, for by their authority they help corrupt the most sober workmen. Finally, spirituous liquor should have very heavy taxes laid upon them, a measure much more moral and salutary than taxing salt and flour, and the consumption of amyl alcohol should be prohibited, and also the use of all alcohols not rectified, including bitters, vermouth, etc., since these are the most harmful to health. It has also been proposed to forbid the sale of alcoholic drinks on credit, and to declare contracts made to the wine sellers not binding. A measure that seems especially practical is to have the working man's wages paid to his family in the morning instead of at night, and never on a holiday or the day before. Let no one interpose the usual prospect about personal liberty, for when we see the Anglo-Saxons, the most dramatic people in the world, carrying their restrictions even to the hours when liquor may be sold at the amount that each person may have in his house, when we see Gladstone the promoter and apostle of similar measures, while in Italy the hours of sale are increased, and no one raises a voice for the substitution of taxes on the wine shops or the baneful taxes upon salt and flour, one is driven to ask himself whether this pretended devotion to liberty is not simply the result of the avarice of trade. Subchapter 143. Cure. With regard to direct cure, use has been made of strychnine, bromides, tincture of nux vomica, cold baths, Kowalski, baths of hot air impregnated with vapour of turpentine, and sulphur baths, according to the nature of the case and its complications. Massage and gymnastics have also been made use of, and Forel, Ladame, and Bucknell have obtained good results with hypnotism where the patient was susceptible to it. Forel, Kowalski, Ladame, Legrain, and Magnan have introduced the rational cure of drunkenness by isolation and absolute deprivation of all alcoholic drinks for a period which Masson, Crother, and Hirsch think should be a year. Drysdale and Krebelin 9 months, and Ferrell from 4 months to a year. Magnan advises further a light strengthening diet, meat, vegetables, fruits, and sweet foods, and for drinks, bitter infusions, hops, quassia, bullion, tea, and coffee. To this we may add muscular labour, especially agriculture, hence for those who are not accustomed to it. But as Magnan says, what is especially necessary is a moral reduction, by means of discussions and lectures, which shall show to these patients the danger and harm of alcohol, and awaken their affections of moral sense. For this purpose Forel has established in the country the asylum of Ellerton, a kind of farm colony, under the paternal rule of a superintendent who is at once administrator and the educator of his charges. These form one family, living in common a simple and healthful life, encouraging one another, busy with regular work, and always subjected to total abstinence. This experiment is a success in 65% of the cases. Similar methods in the United States, from the statistics of 3,000 cases, show about the same percentage of success. Magnan proposes the committal to a special asylums of habitual drunkards and of all who have alcoholic delirium, even after delirium has ceased, for 17 to 18 months, or in the case of incurables, for an indeterminate period, as is already prescribed in the canton of St. Gall in Switzerland. Hospitals for alcoholics have a double object. First, that of protecting society by withdrawing drunkards from it, and second, that of putting the drunkards in the best condition for cure and correction. Such hospitals should receive, first, the person who has committed an offence in a drunken fit, secondly, anyone who has dissipated his own property and that of his family by his intemperance, and thirdly, any person found drunk on the street a number of times, etc. In the first class of cases, the hospital is a substitute for the prison or insane asylum. In the others, it is a temporary refuge. Anyone who has committed a crime in a state of intoxication, if after investigation by experts is proved to be dangerous, should be shut up in an inebriate hospital for an indeterminate period. In the case where a crime has been committed by an intoxicated person who is not an habitual drunkard, and he is found to be perfectly sound, he should be examined for anthropological and physical marks of degeneracy as signs of a criminal tendency. If these are found, he should not be released until a cure is assured, which means, in most cases, is permanent detention. End of section 21.